Hello everyone, this is your friend Sai Yan Paradox Audio Fanfic and we are back in new fanfic. What if Mr. Satan's lie was finally exposed, and Videl lost everything? Part 3. Videl and Gohan arrived back at the house and entered into the kitchen to find Hercule still sitting there just looking at the kitchen table, his eyes not leaving it as the two teenagers walked back in. Goten had finished his breakfast and went to watch cartoons on TV for a while. Chi-Chi was tidying up the kitchen when she turned around to the sound of the teenagers walking in. "Oh Gohan, Videl, you're back," she said. "Hi Chi-Chi, I'm sorry for my behavior earlier," said Videl with a heartfelt apology. "That's quite alright dear, it's a perfectly normal reaction when a big muscle-bound oaf decides to try and be witty," she said, glaring over at the afro-haired man. Hercule meekly looked up, ashamed of himself. "Now, I'm going to go grocery shopping, Gohan, I'll need your help," said Chi-Chi. "Sure thing Mom," he replied. "So are you two gonna go train with Krillin today?" He then turned to ask Videl and Hercule. "No, I think we're gonna sit here and have a little chat, aren't we Dad?" Videl said, making sure to put extra emphasis on whom she was speaking to as she took a seat opposite him at the table. Hercule nodded without uttering a word. "Okay, I'll let Krillin know what's happening then," replied Gohan as he went out into the hallway to make a phone call. "Goten honey, turn the TV off, we're going grocery shopping," Chi-Chi called for her youngest. Goten switched off the TV and joined his mother in the hallway. "Be a dear and go fetch Nimbus, would you?" she asked her son. "Sure thing Mom," replied the eager Goten, as he ran out the front door and yelled out at the top of his lungs. Nimbus. Meanwhile, Gohan had picked up the phone and dialed Krillin's number. He waited as the phone rang a couple of times before being answered. "Gopher came house," answered Krillin. "Hey Krillin, it's Gohan," replied Gohan. "Oh hey Gohan, what's up?" he asked. "Not much, we've had a bit of a setback and I don't think there'll be any training today," he replied to his older friend. "Really? What happened?" Krillin asked. "Well, Hercule is really struggling I think and he really wasn't up for training today, then he said something stupid to Videl and now she'd rather have a particular talk with her dad about previous events," he explained. "Oh, yeah I can see why that might be a problem," replied Krillin. "Yeah, I was thinking though, do you guys wanna come over here a little later? We're going out grocery shopping just now but I thought maybe you could help me with building the home for them," asked Gohan. "Sure, it's been quite a while since we've been over, would be nice for a catch-up," he said. "Great, thanks Krillin, anyway I've gotta go, see you later," replied Gohan. "No problem, catch ya later," said Krillin as both men hung up the phone. Krillin then turned to look over his shoulder and called back into the living area. "Honey, how do you fancy a trip to Mount Paozu?" After Gohan hung up the phone, he met his mother in the hallway. "Okay Mom, I'm ready," he said. "Good, let's go," she replied, before calling into the kitchen. "I hope you two will be okay while we're gone," she said, getting a nod of the head from Videl who hadn't once taken her eyes off her father and a meek nod from Hercule who kept looking at his daughter before averting his eyes. As Chi-Chi left, Gohan this time turned back to speak. "Hey Videl," he called. This was the only time since she began staring down her father that she turned her head, albeit reluctantly as her head had moved first whilst her eyes hadn't left her father before she eventually trained them on Gohan. "I hope you're okay," he said. Videl looked straight at the boy for a moment, her face still in a scowl before it let up slightly and a smile formed on her face that said, "I'm still angry but thanks for trying, it means a lot, thanks," she replied. Gohan then made his way out of the house and closed the door behind them. Goten was already sitting on the magic cloud and Chi-Chi had just finished climbing on. "Ready Gohan?" she asked. "Sure. I'm just gonna make myself scarce, after all," They don't know about flying yet and I don't want to take the chance that they look out the window, he replied. Okay, but don't take too long. Let's go, Godin, she said. Okay, Nimbus, let's go, commanded Godin, and the little magic cloud took off with its passengers in tow. Gohan walked around the other side of the house, away from the kitchen windows before taking off into the air and flying in pursuit of his brother and his mother. Videl was still glaring daggers at her father. Hercule still couldn't look Videl in the eye. It had been a tense standoff which had been going for 10 minutes since the sons had left the home. Eventually, Videl had had enough and began. Well, father, now that we are alone, maybe you could start explaining why exactly we are in this mess, she asked, rather demanded. Hercule blanched. He didn't know what to say or if he could say anything. He had gotten too comfortable whilst staying with the Sun family, and now, his only daughter had effectively cornered him, and he needed to have a good explanation or face losing her as well. Well, sweetie, you see, Hercule stammered. I'll tell you why, Daddy, she said sarcastically for him, it's because you lied. She said, pointing an accusatory finger at him. And what's worse, you not only lied but you've been lying for the last 7 years to everyone, including me. She continued, barely blinking whilst seething with anger. I can't stand liars, but you. I can't believe my own father couldn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. And now I have to suffer because people think I know what happened, that I was in on it and covered for you, and then I went running and into hiding with you, and do you know why? She asked after her rant. Hercule had been staring wide-eyed the whole time, daring not to squeak out any sounds for fear of her wrath. He merely shook his head from side to side, as this was about as much as he could do right now out of fear. It's because I love you, Daddy, she said as she began to try and hold back her emotions. She was Videl Satan after all, can't go around being all emotional. It's just been me and you for years. We've trained together, fought together and won together. I've trusted you every step of the way, believed in everything you've said, how you're the strongest in the world, but now I know the truth. You say you're the strongest, yet some skinny blonde kicked your ass in the first round, and the worst part is, she outclassed you every step of the way, she rambled on, her voice cracking slightly as her emotions began to come to the forefront. It was right then, when you hit the outside of the ring, that I realized, the stories, they were all lies, my life, built on a lie, you beating Cell, a lie. She continued, tears now rolling down her face. There was simply no way that you beat Cell, not with a piss-poor performance like that. I used to be proud to say who my dad was, to call myself Satan. Now, I'm just Videl. I'm just a girl, living with a family who I hardly know in the middle of the woods with the father I disowned, she said, unable to stop the tears from coming. Hercule, who was already stiff as a board, stiffened even more and sat at his full height at those last words, the father I disowned. Vid Videl he tried to say. No. Save it. I'm done. I couldn't care less about what really happened. Why would I believe anything that comes out of your mouth from now on? She asked, though was not expecting any answer. Hercule was flabbergasted. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what he could say to that. The screeching of wood against floor could be heard as Videl stood up from the table to leave. Hercule made a last gasp attempt to get his daughter to listen. Videl, sweet pea, wait, please listen. He begged as he too stood up and reached his arm out towards her in a motion for her to stop and turn back around. Don't ever speak to me again, she cried out the last part and ran from the room, upstairs and into the room that she was currently occupying. Hercule stood there, motionless for a moment before his hand fell to his side and his head sunk as low as it could whilst he remained standing. What have I done? He whispered to himself as a single tear began to run down his face. She lay there on the bed for an unknown amount of time. She didn't care though, she had nothing left. Well, that wasn't exactly true. She had Arasa and Sherpner, her best friends, although she couldn't really see them when she wanted, as they'd have to come all the way out here to see her, which right now wasn't too likely. Then there was Gohan, the nerdy boy from school who has been nothing but nice to her, never once said a bad word about her, talked behind her back about her, or used her to get to that man. She couldn't wait until Gohan and his family got home. Maybe once he was back, if she asked real nice, he'd lay there with her and listen to her ramblings and allow her to steal a hug or two. Cammy knows she needed a hug right now, but the pillow would have to do for the moment. A while later, Gohan, Goten and Chi-Chi returned from shopping, stopping just at the edge of the clearing and walking back towards their home. If I've told you boys once, I've told you 100 times, you are to keep your appetites under control when we're in public, scolded Chi-Chi. Sorry Mom, said both boys. Good, now hurry up and let's get these groceries in the house so I can start preparing lunch and dinner for tonight, she said. Both Gohan and Goten nodded and continued on their way home. Upon arriving, Chi-Chi opened the front door and led the way in. Videl, Hercule, we're home, she called out into the house. No response. Strange, hello, anybody home? She called out again. She moved into the kitchen to find Hercule just sitting there, his eyes glued to the table as he sat hunched over with a few tears having hit the table. Hercule, is everything all right? Chi-Chi asked hesitantly as Gohan and Goten walked in behind her. No, was all he said, not even bothering to look up at the woman. She placed the bags down and walked over to him and put a hand on his shoulder. Is it to do with Videl? She asked carefully. Hercule only nodded a response. Chi-Chi gathered that their talk must not have gone very well if he was here sulking and Videl wasn't to be seen. At this, Gohan reached out his senses and determined that Videl was upstairs in Goten's room. I'll go check on her, he said, addressing his mother. Videl lay there, not long ago having woke up from a nap. She figured that she must have cried herself to sleep, something that she hadn't done in a number of years, not since her mom had gone. She was staring blankly at the wall, trying to figure out what to do next. Hell, was there even a next? Where did you go from here? Nobody wants to know you. Nobody cares. Nobody is going to give you a break. Nobody is going to give you any help. All that will happen is the world will try to break you down until there is nothing left and then break you down even further beyond that. So why bother? Is there a point in building a house? Even if it is built, would she then have to share it with him? Just then, a light rapping could be heard from the door. Hey Videl, it's Gohan. Are you okay? She heard from the other side of the door. She turned her head to look at the door and sat for a moment, deciding on whether or not to talk to Gohan about her discussion with Hercule. On one hand, she wanted to talk to him and just lay there and hug him for comfort. On the other hand, she didn't want to burden him with her problems. After another tentative moment, she called out to him. Yeah, the door's open, she said. The door creaked open and Gohan popped his head in. Hey, can I come in? He asked. Sure, she replied. He walked in and closed the door over. So, I take it the conversation with your dad didn't exactly go well? He asked further. No, she replied as she stared down at the ground. Do you wanna talk about it? He asked. Not really, no, was her response. Oh, okay, I guess I'll go then, he replied. Wait, Gohan, could I ask you a favor? She asked with a hint of panic or desperation in her voice. Sure, what is it? He asked. Could you maybe sit with me for a while? She asked. Of course, he replied and made his way to the bed and sat down next to her. Once he had sat down, Videl shifted herself to be sat next to him and slowly leaned her head to rest on his shoulder. Gohan was surprised at this but made no movement and simply let her rest her head on his shoulder. They both sat there in silence for a while, possibly a quarter of an hour, but he wasn't really sure. Eventually Videl moved to sit upright again and she turned her head towards him. "Thank you Gohan, for everything," she said, a small smile lightly adorning her face. "Anytime," he replied, a smile on his face as he put his hand on her shoulder and gave her a light yet reassuring squeeze. Both of their chests fluttered once more strongly than either of them had experienced previously, and both teens' faces, flushing slightly. Videl turned her head away in embarrassment, yet a small smile remained on her face. Gohan quickly got up before saying over his shoulder, "Krillin should be here soon along with 18 and Marin." "Oh, why are they coming here?" she asked curiously. Gohan then turned fully around to face her again. "Well, since you and your dad aren't going to go training, I thought he could come and help us build the house for you guys," he replied. "Really? You didn't need to do that, you know," she replied bashfully. "Well, yeah, I know, but the sooner we can get the house done, the sooner you can get your own space. I know having a room to yourself is probably enough, but I'm sure you want a room to call your own and not Godin's room for the rest of your life," he explained. Videl knew he was right, though the thought of spending the rest of her life in a house with him wasn't very off-putting at all. "Yeah, I guess you're right. I think I'll come help you guys. My body seems to have loosened up a bit. Maybe running off into the woods actually did some good," she replied. "Great. Well, I guess I'll leave for now. I'll call up when they arrive," he replied before making his way out of the room. Videl decided to freshen up a bit before Krillin and his family arrived. After all, she'd been running out in the woods, cried for a while and slept in the clothes she had only freshly put on that morning. She wanted a chance to restart the day afresh, so a change in clothes and another shower might just help. She got a fresh set of clothes and grabbed a few towels and went back to the bathroom. She started the shower to allow it time to heat up before removing her clothes and taking a step into the nice warm shower. She turned the heat up slightly to allow the hot water to help relax her muscles, hoping to take away any of the extra strain they had already been under. As she was showering, she thought back to Gohan sitting on the bed with her. She was very thankful for having Gohan as a friend. The fact that he didn't ask her any questions and just allowed her to rest her head on his shoulder was pure bliss. She didn't really want to talk and she would have preferred to have had a hug, but she thought she was likely pushing her luck at that point. She couldn't shake the thought of the boy from her head. His shoulders were broad. She noticed that when he was standing in front of her in the bedroom before leaving. She could also tell he was definitely hiding more muscles than he would let on. She had noticed this when resting on his shoulder. Her arm had been brushing against his arm and part of his torso with the way she was sitting. The thought caused her to blush again as the hot water ran down her neck onto her chest and made its way down the rest of her body, causing certain parts of her body to become slightly aroused. "Stop it, Videl. This is no time to be thinking like that. Gohan is a nice, sweet, innocent young man, and the last thing you need to be doing is causing any more problems for him or yourself right now, or you might find yourself with nowhere to go, especially if that house isn't finished," she both thought and chastised herself at the same time. "Hey Videl, Krillin's here," she heard from outside the bathroom. She turned the water off and began drying herself off before shouting back a reply. "I'll be down in a few minutes." She might have needed a bit longer as her hair had gotten wet, so would need drying time, and she hadn't quite shaken the thought of Gohan from her mind. "Come on Videl, steel yourself, you've got bigger issues to worry about," she said to herself, trying to focus her thoughts. Once she had dried herself and put on the new clothes, she made her way back to the bedroom to sort her hair quickly, then made her way downstairs. The first thing she heard was her new mentor's voice. "Hey Videl, how you holding up? I hope that training wasn't too much for you," he asked with a huge grin on his face. "Hey Krillin. Yeah, the training really kicked our butts, I'm not gonna lie," she replied with a chuckle, trying to hide how much it felt like hell. "Good to hear. Well, despite the fact that we're not training today, I think we could still get in a good workout when we build this house of yours, he explained. I never thought of that, she replied. Yeah, it's the kinda thing me and Goku used to do way back in the day, he said. Just as he had said that, 18 came through from the kitchen with Marin following closely behind. Hey, said 18 as she addressed Videl. Hey 18, hey Marin, it's good to see you both again, she replied with smiles for both of them. 18 looked at the girl for a moment, then in a rare moment smiled back. It's nice to see you too, Videl. She must like you. It's not often she smiles at people, Krillin chuckled before looking over at his wife. That probably hadn't been the smartest thing he'd said in a while, as 18 only glared at him with those icy cold blues of hers. Krillin paled slightly before being saved by Videl. So, Krillin, you came here to help us build this house. Why don't we get started right away? She smiled awkwardly. Why yeah, good idea, he replied with a scared tone before making a beeline for the door. Come on Gohan, me and Krillin are getting a start on the house now, she called into the kitchen on her way past before talking to 18 in a hurried tone. It was nice talking to you 18, I'd love to stay and chat but got a house to build, she said as she hurried out the door. Gohan then walked into the hallway just outside the kitchen, confused as to what was going on. Why are they in such a hurry? He asked as he turned to 18. Once he had seen the glare on 18's face, he realized exactly why. Someone, Krillin, had made a comment and she wasn't happy. Oh, is that the time? Gotta go. Be somewhere. Bye. He too also rushed out the door. Although Gohan could take on 18 in a fight if it ever came to it, she still punched hard and he'd rather not be on the receiving end of one of her fists. It oddly reminded him of being hit by his mom's frying pan for some reason. Krillin, Videl and Gohan all made their way towards the site for Hercule and Videl's new house. Krillin looked around for a bit before speaking up. Okay, so where should we start? He asked. Well, we dug the whole foundation. Videl half explained, half asked. Gohan filled in the rest. Yeah, that's right. We'd best look at getting the foundation set just now and then work on the rest of the house as we go along, he explained. Great. So have you got the building materials? Krillin asked. Well, we've picked out some trees but we haven't chopped them down yet, so I guess that's where we're headed next. Asked Videl. Sounds good to me, replied Gohan. Lead the way, said Krillin. As the trio made their way to their desired trees with Videl leading, Gohan hung back slowly to talk to Krillin. I don't know if I've already mentioned this, but she still doesn't know about energy control, so we can't just blast the trees down, he whispered. Sure thing, you've got it. I did think about that and I think I've got a creative way around it, replied Krillin. Eventually they made it to one of the trees that they were going to use to start with. Hey Gohan, this was one of the trees, right? Videl asked. Yeah, that's the one, he replied. Alright, now Videl, since our training was cancelled today, let me show you something, started Krillin. The reason I had you and your dad doing such an intensive warm-up is for this reason, he finished before moving to the side of the tree. He took a stance with the tree in front of him and motioned a few times with his arm as if he were about to punch the tree, taking deep breaths as he did. He's not really going to try and punch the tree down, is he? Asked a curious and skeptical Videl. Just watch, was all Gohan said to her. After a few more motions, Krillin drew his arm back and yelled out as he threw his arm straight at the tree, connecting with it. The tree shook violently before it started toppling over, roots being ripped out of the ground as the large tree was felled and hit the ground with a crashing force that could be heard for some distance. Videl just stood there, flabbergasted at what just happened, unable to believe that such a feat were possible. How did you do that? She asked with complete disbelief. Lots of hard work and training. That is what the turtle hermit style can do for you, Videl, and so much more. Heck, just ask Gohan, He could probably just push it over, said Krillin with a smirk on his face. Gohan didn't exactly want Videl knowing that, as it would just draw suspicion towards him. Videl turned her head to look at Gohan, her gaze meeting his as he turned his head to face her before replying to Krillin's comment. Possibly, he replied uneasily, though it could have been mistaken for him being unsure if he could or couldn't do it, whilst in reality, he knew fine well he could possibly do it with 2 or 3 fingers instead of the whole palm of his hand. Videl's eyes grew wider. Never in her wildest dreams did she think a single person could topple a tree without an axe or some other instrument, yet here Krillin just demonstrated it for her and then implied that her friend, and possible crush, was potentially able to do it with much more ease than Krillin had. I'm not gonna lie though, it'll take a hell of a lot of hard work to get to this kind of level, if you're up to the challenge, said Krillin. Videl looked back at him and thought for a moment about what Krillin had just performed before her face became serious. A challenge? Why? She was Videl, she could never refuse a challenge. Yeah, I'm in, she replied in a serious tone. Gohan looked over to Videl and seen the seriousness in her face. This was the Videl he knew, this was the one that he had known in school, this was the one. Where'd that come from? Alright, come on, help me get this back to the house so we can get to work, said Krillin. Both teens helped with moving the mighty tree, though if Videl were being honest, she didn't feel like she was doing much of the work lifting this big tree. It seemed like a heck of a lot of the weight was being carried by the 2 men, another question to add to her list of questions for Gohan. The 3 made their way back to the house and began chopping their quarry into pieces that could be used for the stilts of the house. They had made tremendous progress on the house today, as they had been able to put up all the stilts for the home and had even begun making the base for the house. That had been a lot further than when Hercule and Scherpner had helped them. A few hours had passed by and the 3 of them had slowed down their pace as they finished putting the base of the home together, and in good time too. Not only had they run out of wood and would need to chop down some more trees, but it was now late afternoon and Gohan's stomach was telling him what time it was. What the heck was that? Asked Videl. Oh, that was just my stomach, said Gohan, one hand behind his head with the famous grin his family were known for. Oh yeah, I forgot exactly how much food you pack away, no wonder it's growling at you, said Videl with a slight chuckle in her voice. Just at that they heard someone yelling towards them from Gohan's home. Dinner's ready, shouted Chi-Chi. Alright, quitting time, said Krillin. Gohan moved at a slightly quicker pace than the other 2 to reach the home first. He sure does like his food, doesn't he? Joked Videl. His father and brother are exactly the same, not to mention a few of our other friends. It's like they're bottomless pits, he replied. The 2 of them arrived at the house and made their way inside, closing the door behind them. They made their way into the kitchen where 18 and Marin were sitting down on one side of the table. Gohan and Goten sat at the other side of the table. Hercule sat at the foot of the table and glanced at the doorway as Videl came in before averting his eyes back to his empty plate, waiting for everyone to sit down. Videl merely looked at him in annoyance before taking a seat at the head of the table. 18 picked Marin up and sat her on her lap so that Krillin could also sit down. Thanks again for having us, Chi-Chi. It's nice to be able to visit once in a while, said 18. Oh, it's no trouble at all, I mean look who I normally cook for, said Chi-Chi. Still, you should come visit us once in a while, Chi-Chi, take a break from feeding these 2, said Krillin pointing at the half-Saiyans as he sat down. I don't know about that, after all if I take even one day off I'm sure they'd go weak from starvation, chuckled Chi-Chi. You wouldn't really do that, would you, Mom? Asked Goten, his eyes wide with curiosity and slight fear that Chi-Chi actually would. Don't worry, Goten, I wouldn't let you go hungry, she said, smiling at the young boy who relaxed once his mother had assured him his food supply wouldn't be stopped. Now, everyone except Gohan and Goten can dig in, said Chi-Chi to the table. Ah, Mom, said both boys. Now, boys, if you get to go first, there won't be anything left for the rest of us, said Chi-Chi as she reminded both her sons. Yes, ma'am, they replied. Videl watched the scene unfold in front of her as she reached to various different bowls and dishes to fill her plate. She couldn't help but think how cute it was to see Gohan sitting so helpless in front of all this food. She had to mentally slap herself for thinking that he was cute, not realizing that she was staring at him. He looked up and caught her looking and smiled at her. In return, she smiled back before finishing loading her plate. All right, is that everyone? Asked Chi-Chi as everyone nodded in confirmation that they had filled their plates. Okay, boys, now you can eat, she said to her sons. No sooner had she said that did half the table look empty from the two of them grabbing food seemingly at random. Videl didn't think she'd ever get used to seeing this sort of thing at meal times. After dinner was finished, Videl offered to do the dishes for Chi-Chi. After all, it was the right thing to do seeing as the mother took good care of them all. Chi-Chi had ordered Gohan to help her while she, Hercule, who was still rather quiet, Krillin and 18 all went into the main room to chat and have coffee. Goten and Marin went up to his room to play whilst Videl wasn't in it. Videl washed dishes whilst Gohan dried them, and they steadily fell into a routine without even trying, as if they just knew how to fall in line with the other's rhythm. Halfway through washing, Videl stole a glance at Gohan. He looked so calm and peaceful, like nothing troubled him at all. She wondered what he thought of her, though she already had an idea after a conversation that they had previously. Although he was such a great friend to her, she had begun to wonder if there was something more, something that she could maybe pursue. A wild notion, to say the least. She had never been interested in boys before, she never had to be. She used to have one goal, and that was to become the strongest, stronger than even him. In turn, this would help her police work and finally get her out from his shadow. But now that dream was kind of gone. Sure, she could still train and get ridiculously stronger if Krillin were the standard to go by, but she wouldn't be able to go back to the police force and work there any longer, and being stronger than her father meant nothing now. No, all she had really was Gohan, well, that and his family and friends, of course, but really it was just Gohan she had. She wasn't keeping up to date with Arasa or Sherpner like she should, so it was just him, but if she were being honest with herself, he might be all she really needed. Gohan was so supportive, kind and caring, had nothing but nice things to say about her despite everything she had put him through previously, never held any malice or ill will towards her, and heck, would probably defend her honor because that is just the kind of guy that Gohan is. She hadn't realized that she was now staring at him, nor did she know for how long she had been staring, as it was only when she realized that he was clicking his fingers in front of her did she snap out of her trance. Earth to Videl, are you okay? He asked worriedly. What? Oh, sorry, I was just deep in thought, she replied quickly. I'll say, there are still dishes to be done, silly, he chuckled. Right, Gohan, can I ask you something? She asked. Sure, go ahead, he replied. Is what Krillin said true? Could you really have pushed that tree with just the palm of your hand? She asked tentatively. Gohan was a bit conflicted on how to answer. It was never going to be an easy question to answer, not without her knowing everything that he wanted to tell her. He thought about it for a moment to decide the best way to answer. Honestly, yeah, I could do it, he replied. Really? I'll be honest, Gohan, I didn't think you had the strength to do anything like that, she replied. Whatever gave you that idea? He then asked. Well, for starters, you've never really shown any muscle mass to give the impression that you work out. That and, you're too nice, she said. Too nice? What does that mean? Asked Gohan with a confused expression. I don't mean it in a bad way, I just mean, I couldn't see you harming a fly, let alone trying to destroy anything of nature, she explained. I see, I suppose I get what you mean. I wear baggy clothes if you haven't noticed because I don't want people to see my muscles. I'm kinda self-conscious about it, that and I have some scars that I'd rather people not see, he explained. Videl could tell that the scars were a rather sore subject for him. That's alright, you don't need to explain it to me. Though I'm naturally curious, if you couldn't tell, I'll not ask about how you got those scars, she said in an understanding voice. Thanks, Videl. If I can trust you enough, I might be willing to tell you about them, but another time, perhaps, he said. Sure, she said as she flashed him a smile. That smile, Gohan thought, could easily melt his heart like a hot knife through butter. It was an image that he would like to keep in his head if he could. The two of them continued to wash the dishes until they were all done and placed back in their respective cupboards. As they joined the others in the main room, Krillin and 18 had just gotten out of their seats ready to leave. Well, it's been fun, but we should really get back home. It is a long journey after all, said Krillin as 18 went upstairs to collect Marin. It was great seeing you all. We should really do this more often, said Chi-Chi. Krillin nodded in agreement. Hey Videl, will you and your father be joining us training tomorrow? Asked Krillin. Videl looked over at Hercule, who only looked back with his eyes and didn't move his head. I don't know, we'll call you in the morning and let you know, she replied. Great, said Krillin as 18 returned with Marin and Godin at her heels. Shall we get going, honey? He asked his wife. All right, let's go, replied 18. They made their way out the front door with Gohan, Godin, Videl and Chi-Chi in tow, bidding them farewell. Krillin threw out a dino cap with their small hovercar inside as the three of them piled in and waved goodbye to everyone standing at the door. After all, they still had to keep up the appearance of not flying. After everyone made their way back into the house, Videl turned to the room and began to speak. If you don't mind, I'm gonna head upstairs. I want to call Arasa on my cell phone and catch up with her before bed, she announced to the room. Not at all, dear. Just don't stay up too late, replied Chi-Chi. Thanks. Good night, everyone, she said. She even glared at her father slightly, more to acknowledge that he existed and nothing more. Good night, Videl, replied the rest of the room. Just before she left the doorway of the room, she looked to Gohan. Good night, Gohan, she said, blushing slightly before quickly turning away and making her way out of the room. Gohan just stood there confused. She already said good night, why did she have to say it again? Chi-Chi, on the other hand, had also been confused, initially, then it clicked in her mind when she noticed the blush on Videl's face. This was too perfect for her. Maybe if all went well, she'd finally get those grandbabies that she always wanted. A big smile adorned her face when she realized what was happening. Hey Squirt, you wanna go upstairs and play in my room for a while? Gohan asked his brother. Sure thing, beamed Godin at the prospect of playing with his brother. He hadn't spent much time with his brother this week, so Godin wasn't passing up this opportunity. The two boys went upstairs, leaving Chi-Chi and Hercule alone. You've been awfully quiet since this afternoon, said Chi-Chi. Hercule finally took his gaze from the point in the room he'd been staring at for, Cammy only knows how long. Wah, oh, yeah, was all that he could say. Was it really that bad? She asked. Yeah, can I be honest with you, Chi-Chi? He asked. Preferably. Yes, she replied. I don't think she's going to forgive me this time. She's always forgiven me for my mistakes, missing school plays, martial arts tournaments, some of the states I've come home in, the women I've invited home, but this rolls all of them up into one little ball, which is just a child's play thing compared to this, he managed to squeak out. I don't know what to do with myself, or if there is anything I can do, he finished. Well, since you were honest with me, I'll be honest with you. We already knew you didn't defeat Cell, said Chi-Chi seriously but quietly. Hercule perked up at this with a confused and worried look on his face. What do you mean, you knew? He asked. Let's just say, you're not the only one who has secrets to keep, but now is not the time to discuss them. I think after this weekend, you'll learn a lot more than you bargained for and will go some way towards mending your relationship with your daughter, explained Chi-Chi. But how? How do you know it'll help? He asked, still confused. Just trust me. For now though, you'll have to just suck it up and get on with it for a few days, as tough as that may seem, she finished before switching the TV on and turning on one of her favorite soaps. Hercule, confused as he was, decided to do something that he hadn't done in a long time. He made his way out of the room and out the back door and sat on the ground a few feet from the door and began an attempt at meditation. Shut up. Just shut up, Videl, shouted Arasa from the other end of the cell phone. This had certainly been a bad idea. Would you please stop yelling that, Arasa? She calmly asked her blonde friend, though with a hint of annoyance. How can I stop yelling? You've just told me that you have a thing for Gohan. You, Videl Satan, she stated. I didn't say that I did, just that, I was thinking about it. Videl tried to defend herself. Even if that's all there was to it, that is still a major leap for you, Videl. You've never admitted once that you've liked any guy, let alone considered anything with a guy. OMG, this is huge, screamed Arasa, bubbly as ever. Please, Arasa, could you tone it down a bit, any louder, and I think he'll hear you from 2 rooms away, replied Videl. And he should know. You'd both make such a cute couple and it would be a match made in heaven for both of you. Besides, I know for a fact that Angela has her eyes on him, as do a few other girls in school, said Arasa, trying to pry more info out of her friend. There was a short pause on the line before Videl spoke up again. Like who? She asked. Why do you want to know? Jealous are we? Teased Arasa. No, of course not, I'm just making conversation, it's not like there's a great deal to do out here, replied Videl. It was a weak defense, but it was all she had. Right. I believe you, Videl. Don't worry about the girls at school, I'll make sure that they know Gohan is off the market, she said. Thanks, Arasa, replied Videl. Why are you thanking me? I thought you were only making conversation. Teased Arasa once again. What I meant was, Videl stammered out, just as Arasa chuckled to herself on the phone. Hee. Good night, Videl, we'll talk soon, said Arasa before hanging up the phone. Videl looked at the phone for a second as the line disconnected and she placed the phone on the bedside table. She got herself ready for bed and then lay down and pulled the covers over her. She was staring at the ceiling, her hands intertwined whilst she fiddled with her thumbs as if she were nervous about something. A single thought was running through her head. Gohan, would you maybe like to go out this weekend? The next morning Videl woke up, wiping away the sleep from her eyes and stretching her muscles before slowly getting out of bed. She wasn't sure what the plan was for the day. After all, tonight was the night of Bulma's party. She made a mental note to phone Arasa and ask if she would like to get ready over at Gohan's, seeing as she couldn't really show her face in the city despite her appearance change, though she would need to clear it with Chi-Chi first. She got up and moved to the dresser where she picked out some clothes and underwear and made her way to the bathroom. She got herself ready for the day, taking care of her business and showering before getting her clothes on. Once she was finished, Videl walked down the stairs and into the kitchen to find the Sun matriarch cooking up a storm. Good morning, Chi-Chi, said Videl in wonderment as she looked around the kitchen. Oh, morning, Videl. Sorry about the mess, replied Chi-Chi. No problem. Chi-Chi, what are you doing? I know the boys eat a lot, but this is insane, exclaimed Videl. Oh no, it's for Bulma's party. As good as those fancy chefs of hers are, they just don't make food the way the men like it. They'll be satisfied sure, but they'll not be fulfilled unless they get the best, smiled Chi-Chi. Okay. Sure, need some help? Asked Videl. Why yes, grab one of those capsules on the counter and store all the food on the table in it please. Asked Chi-Chi. Videl picked up one of the capsules and began to arrange the food for storage. Hey Chi-Chi, where are the boys? I thought they'd be down here by now trying to attack all this food. Asked Videl. Well, I fed them early and sent them off to go play or train or whatever. It was mostly just to get Godin to run off some of that energy of his. After all, we'll be out late tonight and I want him to have a nap in the afternoon so that he'll be able to stay up late and play with Trunks, said Chi-Chi. Oh, alright. Hey Chi-Chi, do you think it would be alright if Arasa were to come over later so we can all get ready for tonight? Asked Videl. She was certainly asking a fair few questions today. That would be wonderful dear. Sure go ahead and ask her, replied Chi-Chi. Thanks. Let me get all this food packed first, replied Videl. She didn't honestly think Chi-Chi would say no but she had to ask first. Once the food was all away, Videl pulled out her cell phone and looked up Arasa's number in her phone as she walked out into the hallway to speak. Just as she was about to hit the call button, Gohan and Godin walked back in through the front door. Hey Videl, greeted both boys looking worn out. Hey boys, have fun? Asked Videl with a giggle. Yeah, Gohan played and trained with me all morning. You should have seen it Videl. I tried jumping right over Big Brother. I didn't think he'd be able to get me that high up but he still grabbed onto my leg and brought me back down, explained Godin. Wow, that must have really been something, replied Videl trying to humor the young boy. She thought he was just over-exaggerating things. It was. I'm gonna go ask Mom if I can have a cookie, said Godin before leaving the teens on their own. So Videl, what you doing out here? Asked Gohan. Videl then turned her attention to the older, hotter-looking boy. She had to mentally slap herself for thinking that before quickly answering him. Oh, I was just gonna phone Arasa and see if she wanted to come over here to get ready for the party at Bulma's tonight. Hey, do you think Bulma would mind if Sherpner came too? I know he hasn't met her but I feel like Arasa might feel a bit left out. After all, she'll only know you, me, your mom, your brother and him. You'll probably be talking to your friends. Chi-Chi will probably be talking with Bulma or 18 I'd imagine. Heck I think I'll not have anyone to talk to now I think about it, said Videl, not stopping for pause. Hee, I wouldn't abandon you Videl, replied Gohan. Videl blushed slightly at the thought of his kindness and being so sweet about keeping her company. Thanks, she replied. I'll go phone Bulma and ask but I don't think she'll mind, he replied. Great. I'm just gonna phone Arasa, she said. They parted ways for a moment, Gohan to go use the house phone and Videl went and stood by the front door and hit the call button on her phone. After a few rings, the ever-bubbly girl answered. Hey Videl, what's up? Answered Arasa. Hey Arasa, not much, just wanted to see if you wanted to come over to Gohan's to get ready for Bulma's party tonight. She asked her friend. Sure Videl, of course, you didn't think I was gonna miss an opportunity to get you all glitzed and glamored now did you? Retorted Arasa. Suddenly Videl remembered why a question like that was a silly thing to ask Arasa. Alright fine but nothing too over the top, replied Videl. TV family-oriented shows. Yes, this is gonna be awesome, cried Arasa. Whilst Arasa was cheering, Videl caught sight of Gohan who was giving her a thumbs up. Oh and invite Sherpner along as well. Gohan's just given me the green light to invite him along, said Videl. Awesome, I'll give him a call and tell him, replied Arasa. Great, I'll text you the details on where he needs to meet up with Gohan, said Videl. Alright, catch ya later Videl, said Arasa. Catch ya later Arasa, replied Videl. So, is Arasa excited for tonight? Asked Gohan who hadn't left after giving Videl the thumbs up. She's always excited hee. Hey Gohan, would you mind meeting Sherpner in West City to take him to the party? I don't want him to roll up on his own, she asked. Of course, Videl. No problem, he replied. Thanks, she replied with a big heartfelt smile on her face. They both made their way into the kitchen to see Chi-Chi still busy with cooking. Just one cookie, Godin, said Chi-Chi. Okay, Mom, said Godin. Hey Mom, I'm going to meet our friend Sherpner later on before the party, so I'll need to leave earlier than everyone. Bulma's already said it was okay for him to come along, he said to his mother. Alright dear, but could you please take Godin with you as well? That way us girls can get ready together, said Chi-Chi as she was stirring something in a pot. Sure thing, Mom, he replied. The two teens continued to help Chi-Chi with prepping and storing food throughout the morning whilst Godin continued to play on his own for a while. Hercule had been awfully quiet all morning as far as Videl was aware. She decided to inquire as to his whereabouts, not that she was concerned but just curious as she ever was. Hey, has anyone seen my da? I mean, Hercule, has anyone seen him at all? She asked, catching herself before calling him her dad. Yeah, he's outside meditating, though to be honest he's not doing very good at it, replied Gohan, slightly miffed that she hadn't yet made an attempt to reconcile with her father. Meditating? I haven't seen him meditate since, maybe ever. She replied whilst being puzzled herself. Well, he's trying, replied Gohan. Well, let him try then, said Videl dismissively. This bothered Gohan, but he decided to drop it for now. It wasn't his issue to solve, but he didn't like watching her dismiss her father entirely. You know, he's decided not to come to Bulma's party tonight, said Gohan. This piqued Videl's interest slightly, but not enough to want to dive further into the topic. Really? What a shame, she replied through a sarcastic mumble. Now, it's not polite to talk about someone like that, said Chi-Chi, reprimanding both teenagers. Sorry Mom, replied Gohan. Sorry Chi-Chi, replied Videl. That's quite alright. Now Videl, do you think you could put all this food in your jetcopter please? Asked Chi-Chi. Sure thing Chi-Chi, she replied. And Gohan, I want you to go pack an overnight bag for Godin. He and I will be staying at Bulma's tonight, she said to her son. Sure thing Mom, he replied, heading for the stairs whilst Videl gathered the capsule and made her way out the door as well. Later in the day, Gohan and Videl went outside for a walk whilst they were waiting for Arasa to arrive. They chatted as they walked towards the stream close to the house. And then he threw me at a mountain, finished Gohan. He threw you at a mountain, said Videl, repeating the statement with a questioning disbelief. Well, yeah, but I mean, PFFT, come on, you think I got anywhere near the mountain, he replied. Reagit, she replied. So anyway, you excited for the party tonight? Asked Gohan. Not sure. I mean, on the one hand I am. It's been way too long since I was last able to just go out and have a good time, she started. But, on the other hand, I don't really know anyone here and I'm a bit nervous of what they might say, she finished as she looked away whilst they kept walking. You don't need to worry about them, Videl. They're good people. Besides, they know your dad didn't beat Cell, he said without thinking. Huh, what do you mean they know? She asked sharply. I mean, they were under the same impression that Krillin was, you know. They thought that your dad didn't beat him either, he said, mentally cursing himself for his slip-up and hoping against hope that she would believe him. Oh, alright, and he is not my father, remember. He's Hercule, she replied. Gohan stopped walking and stood there staring at the ground. Videl walked a few paces more before stopping herself as she realized that her friend wasn't with her. Gohan, why'd you stop? She asked curiously. Videl, promise me something. He asked without looking up. Videl walked back over and stood in front of him. What is it? She asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Please, Try to talk to your dad. I know that you don't want to acknowledge him as your father anymore, but if something were to happen and you didn't get the chance to speak to him or ask him questions or grow up with him by your side, I think you'd regret it, he said as he stared away into the sky as if looking for someone. Gohan. I don't know if I can do that, she replied softly, now looking at the ground herself. I know, it's not easy, all I ask is that you try, he said as he put a hand softly onto her shoulder. She looked back up at his hand and traced it back to his face, a warm gentle smile adorned it and she reciprocated by smiling herself. I'm not making any promises, Gohan, but I'll think about it, she replied. Thank you, he said as they both stared at each other. They were both doing the same thing, admiring the other person, taking in every feature, their hair and eyes and facial features, both finding each other pleasant to look at. Eventually Videl broke the staring contest. We should probably head back, it won't be long until Arasa gets here and you'll need to get to Bulma soon as well, she said. Yeah, you're right, come on, let's go, he replied as they both started walking back the way in which they came, walking in a relative but pleasant silence once more. There was a knocking at the door in the small house which was loud enough for Chi-Chi and her frantic cooking to hear. Goten, would you get that please? She asked. Sure thing, Mom, he replied. Goten made his way to the front door and opened it to be greeted by a blonde-haired teenager. Hi Goten, is your brother and Videl around? She asked. Hi, no, they both went for a walk in the forest, they'll be back shortly, wanna come in and play with me? He asked. Aw, sure thing, she replied. Gohan and Videl are away a walk, are they? Well, Miss Satan, you've certainly dug your claws in, thought Arasa. She followed the young boy into the sitting room where he had previously been watching TV. He grabbed some action figures and gave one to Arasa and they both sat there and played around for a short while. Arasa was actually quite relaxed. Despite the boy's energy, she was enjoying herself and not really worrying about life, until that was interrupted by the front door opening and Gohan and Videl walking back in. Gohan, you're back, shouted Goten as he ran up to his brother to give him a great big hug. Hey Goten, did you miss me? He asked, knowing full well the answer. Replied Goten. Hey Videl. Hey Gohan, said Arasa. Hey Arasa, said Videl as she walked over to her best friend and gave her a hug. Hey Arasa, repeated Gohan, not picking up on the inflection in her tone. So what were you two doing out there all alone in the woods? She asked coyly. Nothing much, we just went for a walk and talked for a while, replied Gohan. Talking, is that what they're calling it now? Replied Arasa, trying to make them blush. Is that what they're calling what now? Asked a confused Gohan. Never mind her Gohan, she's just being silly, said Videl who was currently glaring daggers at her best friend. Sure, replied Arasa with smug little look on her face. Anyway, shall we start getting ready? Asked Arasa. Arasa, relax, there's still hours until the party, replied Videl, confused as to why they would need to start getting ready early. Yeah, I know, but we've got a lot of work to do if we're all going to get ready for a party, replied Arasa. I guess we should get going then, Goten, Gohan said to his brother who just nodded in return. Sorry Gohan, said Arasa with a happy grin across her face. That's okay, come on Goten, let's get your stuff and say bye to Mom, said Gohan as both boys left the room. Whilst they were gone, the girls had a small chat. So Videl, what did you really do out in the woods then? Asked Arasa, her eyes and the tone of her voice telling Videl exactly what she was implying. Arasa, nothing like that, it's just like he said, we walked and talked, replied Videl. Sure you did, said Arasa still sporting a sly smile. We did. Now get your mind off of my non-existent love life for a moment and let's get started on the journey that is getting ready for a party, said Videl sarcastically. Bye Mom, We'll see you when you get to Bulma's, said Gohan as he was walking by the kitchen door and coming up to the sitting room's doorway. Bye Arasa, bye Videl, we'll see you when you get to Bulma's, he said as he went to turn away from the room and head towards the front door. Bye Gohan, bye Goten, said Arasa. Videl didn't say anything but had stood there paused for just a moment. Gohan, wait, said Videl, a little more anxiously than she had meant. Gohan had already opened the door but stopped and turned back around as Videl had walked through doorway to the sitting room. Is something wrong Videl? He asked as she approached him. She walked straight up to him and wrapped her arms around his torso and pulled herself against him and into a hug. Gohan stood there for a moment, confused as to why she had marched up and hugged him, but then, remembering his manners, decided to wrap his arms around her as well and return the hug. After their embrace, they both let go and Gohan, still confused, had to ask her. What was that for? Not that it wasn't nice or nothing, he said, flashing a trademark sun grin. Just wanted to say thanks again, and have a safe trip, she said, face slightly blushing, realizing just how close she had gotten and what she was doing. Thanks Videl, you ladies have a safe trip too, we'll see you soon, he replied as he and Goten left the house and walked away into the forest so as to not be seen flying. Gohan and Goten were flying high in the skies above the clouds on their way to Capsule Core, enjoying the boundless freedom that they had there with the wind rushing past them and the view they could get of the earth below them. Mid-flight, Goten turned to his brother and spoke. Hey Gohan, said Goten, raising his voice over the wind. What's up Goten? His brother asked. I was just wondering, is Videl going to be my new sister? He asked innocently. Gohan went as red as a fire truck and sputtered for a moment. What? No. What gave you that idea? Gohan asked his younger brother. Well, I heard Mom talking and she was saying something about how much you like each other and that one day you would get married. Is that true Gohan? He asked after explaining what he had heard. Well, I mean probably not Goten. I don't even know if she likes me that way, replied Gohan. Mom said she does, replied Goten. What? Was all Gohan could say, looking dumbfounded at his brother. Yeah, Mom was talking to Videl's friend Arasa the last time she here and I heard her say to Mom how much Videl liked you, said Goten still as innocent as ever. Really? I guess I'll have to ask Arasa myself, said Gohan as he looked ahead once more, albeit a bit wide-eyed. Come on Gohan, last one there has to train with Trunks' dad, shouted Goten as he blasted off ahead of his brother. Hey no fair, wait for me, yelled Gohan as he too blasted off to try and catch up with his younger sibling. Meanwhile back at the Sun household, the girls had already started getting ready. Chi-Chi was getting her makeup on whilst waiting for her hair to fully dry out after the shower she'd had whilst Videl and Arasa were in Goten's room. Arasa had badgered Videl into having a shower as soon as possible so that they would have all the time to get ready. Videl didn't see the point in it herself, but she did ask for Arasa's help after all, would be a waste to just ignore her, and a bit disrespectful as well. Okay Videl, remember, get cleaned and remember to shave wink wink, said Arasa. Arasa, stop it would you, I don't need you to remind me about basic hygiene, sheesh, said Videl. Okay, fine but please hurry up, I badly want to do your nails and makeup before moving on to your hair, replied Arasa. My hair? But I thought you liked my hair, said a confused Videl. Oh I do but I just wanna add 1 or 2 touches to really make it stand out is all, replied Arasa. Okay, if you say so, said Videl, slightly defeated yet, slightly curious. With that, Videl made her way to the bathroom to take a shower. Arasa had already had a shower at her place so she didn't need to worry about having one. Instead, she began to get ready herself by doing her makeup first and then moved on to doing her fingernails. Doing her makeup took a fair bit of time, so by the time she had gotten to the 3rd finger on one hand, Videl had already finished her shower and made her way back to the room. Arasa finished doing the remaining fingers and allowed them time to dry before using that hand again. This meant that once Videl had dried off enough, she could then start applying makeup to her until she could use both hands again and do her other hand and Videl's nails. In the meantime, however, Arasa took the task to a whole new level in Videl's eyes as she then began sorting through Videl's undergarments, deciding what the raven-haired girl should and should not wear for the evening. After the awkward conversation had passed, for Videl at least, and both Videl had dried out and Arasa's nails dried, they then began doing Videl's makeup. I don't see what all the fuss is about. I mean, it's just a party we're going to, chit-chat and whatnot, said Videl. Just a party. Just a party. Videl. This is a party held by the Bulma Briefs, we can't just turn up in normal clothes. Besides, how else are you supposed to impress a certain someone, said Arasa as she flashed a smile and a wink to her friend. Yeah, okay, I get your point. Hey, come to think of it, did she even say if it was formal wear or anything other than a dinner party? Asked Videl. Well, it is a dinner party, it's implied that you dress nicely for the occasion. I thought you'd have known that, Videl, what with the number of dinners and parties you've had to attend, replied Arasa. Dresses. Well, yeah, but I haven't been to one in quite some time. Hercule just went off and did his own thing while I stayed at home, went to school, trained, etc., explained Videl. Still calling him Hercule then, huh? Asked Arasa. Videl had filled her in about her father, whilst they were both getting ready. Yep, replied the raven-haired girl. And you're not gonna talk to him? She further asked. Nope, was the curt reply from Videl. Alright, there we go, finishing touches. I know how much you don't like makeup, Videl, so I've only applied a light amount, but I think it makes you look stunning, said Arasa. Videl then picked up the hand mirror from the bed as there wasn't a vanity mirror or full-length one available in Godin's room. She looked at herself and could hardly recognize who she was. Her face had a light brushing of foundation which covered the few freckles she had garnered over the last few weeks due to the weather. She had some reddish eye shadow which would go with her dress when she wore it later, and her eyelashes had some more volume to them but not over the top amounts. Asa. I look amazing, was all Videl to gasp out. Arasa walked up behind Videl and placed her chin on Videl's shoulder and looked in the mirror as well. See what you've been missing out on. I guarantee you, Videl, Gohan will definitely take notice, he won't know what hit him, said Arasa. Videl smiled a happy smile so wide that if the sun were to ever go out she could restart it with the happy thought running through her mind. Hey Arasa, said Videl, grabbing the blonde's attention. Thanks, she said, turning to her friend and embracing in a hug. You deserve this, Videl, but don't cry, I don't want you ruining all that makeup, said Arasa half jokingly, half seriously. Hee, I won't, said Videl. Meanwhile, Chi-Chi had been getting ready herself. She had made sure both her and Videl's dresses were ready for wearing and had left Videl's hanging in Godin's room for her, whilst hers was in her wardrobe. She had had a shower right after Videl and proceeded to dry off, using a hairdryer to try and tame her long hair before she could put it back in the bun that she was so fond of wearing in her hair. Once she had accomplished this, she got her makeup done, similar to Videl, where she only had a light amount applied and put on some pajamas in the meantime as she wasn't quite ready to put her dress on. Chi-Chi made her way out of her bedroom and downstairs into the kitchen. She was greeted with a surprise when she found Hercule doing dishes that hadn't been done earlier in the day. She hadn't had time, and with everyone being busy doing something for the party, she had never gotten around to doing them. Why, Hercule, thank you for doing the dishes for me, said Chi-Chi. Mr. Satan merely looked up from his pile and looked at Chi-Chi before speaking. You're welcome, he said in a low tone. Hercule, are you sure you don't want to come to this party? You'll be more than welcome to come, I've got assurances of that, said Chi-Chi. I appreciate it, Chi-Chi. Actually, I appreciate everything you've done for us. Really, I do. However, I don't feel deserving of fine dining and whining right now, and I've got other problems that I need to spend more time figuring out, he replied. Okay, but if you change your mind, just phone Bulma's and someone will come get you. Her number's on speed dial, said Chi-Chi. Thanks, Chi-Chi, said Hercule as he turned back to do the dishes. Chi-Chi made her way back upstairs and into her room. She took off her pajamas and took her own dress out of her wardrobe. Hers wasn't new, it was just something she had used once or twice previously, seeing as she didn't get out of the house much. She squeezed herself into the dress and zipped it up, doing a quick twirl in her mirror. Chi-Chi was happy with herself, the first time in quite some time that she felt as happy, though there would always be something missing from that happiness. She grabbed a pair of earrings from her small jewelry collection and made her way out of the bedroom and down the hall. She stopped in front of Godin's room and knocked on the door. Videl, Arasa, are you girls ready yet? She asked whilst trying to get one of the earrings on her ear. Not quite, our makeup is done. We just need to get Videl in her dress and then a small touch for her hair, and then I need to finish my hair, said Arasa from the other side of the door. Okay, don't be too long, we don't want to keep anyone waiting, said Chi-Chi as she went back to her room and lay on the bed, taking a small breather for the day. Okay, Videl, let's get this dress on you, said Arasa. Sure thing, replied Videl, as she stood awkwardly in her underwear. Videl sat on the end of the bed as she placed the dress at her feet and slid her legs in, pulling the dress up towards herself before she stood and pulled the dress up further. Once the dress had reached her chest area, she placed one arm through the sleeve hole and then placed her other arm through the opposite hole and then turned around, pulling her hair up slightly. Hey, could you zip me up? Videl asked. Sure, said Arasa as she grabbed the zip and pulled it all the way to the top. Videl then turned back around to face her friend, who eyed her up and down. You do scrub up good after all, said Arasa with a smirk adorning her face. Videl shoved her on the shoulder. Shut up, she playfully responded. Okay, last thing, hair, said Arasa. So, what exactly are you going to do to my hair this time? Asked Videl. Well, last time I chopped off all that long hair and removed some of the volume, leaving you with shoulder-length hair, right? Said Arasa. Right, replied Videl cautiously. This time, I'm going to do something simple that will make you look so damn beautiful that Gohan won't be able to resist you, said Arasa enthusiastically. Okay, so what is it? Asked Videl. You'll see, replied Arasa. Videl didn't like to wait. She was a rather impatient person, but she'd wait this one out, seeing as it was Arasa. Arasa pulled out a hair curler from her bag of tricks and plugged it into the nearest outlet. Once it had heated, she began to comb Videl's hair and then wrapped the curler into a big strand of her hair just right of her fringe. She did this twice and then removed the curler, leaving Videl with a big curl in her hair and the rest of her hair just as straight as it was before. All done. Now you're ready for the party, said Arasa. Videl looked at herself in the handheld mirror, admiring her makeup and her hair before looking down and all around her body at the dress. I honestly don't know what to say, Arasa, said Videl in an appreciative manner. You don't have to say anything, you deserve this, remember. Now, I've got to get my dress on, then straighten my hair, and we're ready, said Arasa. Dresses. Right. Let's get you ready then, said Videl. Arasa had brought with her a long green dress that was flowing at the bottom around her ankles at the back, but only went down past her knees at the front, and 2 straps on her shoulders, leaving her arms bare. She then pulled out her straighteners from her bag and plugged them into the same outlet that the curlers had previously been in. After waiting for them to heat up and chatting with Videl, she began straightening her hair and brushing through it to make sure there weren't any tangled ends, and then straightening again. After what seemed like an eternity, both girls were ready and made their way out of the room, each carrying a small purse and Arasa carrying her bag of tricks. Okay, Chi-Chi, we're ready, said Videl as they approached the stairs. Chi-Chi emerged from her room with a long gray dress that reached to her ankles and short-length sleeves and had also put on a white cardigan which she had left open. Great. Let's get going, said Chi-Chi as they all made their way downstairs. As they reached the bottom, Chi-Chi was able to see Hercule in the kitchen nursing a cup of coffee that he was staring down in the dark, never wavering from the hot liquid as the steam rose. You girls go on ahead and get the jet copter ready, I'll just be a moment, said Chi-Chi as she made her way into the kitchen. Hey Hercule, how are you? Asked Chi-Chi. Hercule looked up at Chi-Chi, startled from his thoughts. Whoa, it's you Chi-Chi. I'm okay, I guess, was the weak reply from the former champ. Are you sure you don't want to come with us tonight? It would be a great opportunity for you to just relax, she said, trying to persuade him. I appreciate it, Chi-Chi, really I do, but I think sitting here and collecting my thoughts is the best way for me to relax tonight. Go on, enjoy yourselves, he replied. Okay, call us if anything happens, said Chi-Chi reluctantly. I will, he replied. With that, Chi-Chi left the kitchen and out through the front door, closing it behind her. Videl and Arasa had managed to clamber into the jet copter, a thought that they hadn't considered about their method of travel. Chi-Chi's sweat dropped as she too hadn't thought of this. Eventually, with all three of them in the jet copter, Videl closed the pit and powered up the engines, and slowly the vehicle rose from the ground before gaining some serious altitude. Videl then swung the jet copter around until they were pointed in the direction of West City and motioned the controls forward to move the jet copter in that direction. West City, here we come, said an excited Arasa. Yeah, let's go, said Videl. I can't wait until you get a look at me, Gohan. Don't think I've forgotten about how you were looking at me after getting my hair done. Cammy knows what this will do to you, thought Videl as the jet copter flew off into the distance. Sat in the kitchen of the small house was the same man who had declined to go to the party, still staring down the coffee which had now gone cold. He'd been pondering what he was going to do for some time. Finally, though, he had made up his mind, and taking a long drawn-out sigh, stood from the table and poured out the coffee, rinsing the cup he had used. He made his way into the sitting room and took his bag of clothes and other items and placed the bag onto the couch. He then pulled an envelope from his pocket and placed it next to his bag. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me, Videl, he said aloud to himself as he left the room and made his way out of the door. TV family-oriented shows. He locked the door with the spare key that Chi-Chi had left for him to lock himself in with, only he locked himself out and then posted the key back through the letterbox. He turned to face away from the home and looked around for something which took him a moment to find in the dark before spotting his destination. Well, I guess it's time, he said to himself before starting off in the direction of the cliff. Somewhere high in the clouds, Gohan and Goten were making their way towards West City for Bulma's party, the wind rushing through their faces and past their ears as they could see the world below them between the clouds. Whoa, I sometimes forget just how wonderful everything looks from up here, Gohan said aloud to himself. Hey Gohan, said Goten. What's up, Goten? Asked Gohan. I was wondering, why is Mr. Satan not coming to the party tonight? Asked the innocent boy. Oh, well, he and Videl aren't exactly on speaking terms right now, so he decided to stay home instead, explained Gohan. How come they ain't talking to each other? Asked Goten, confused as to why. Do you remember the day that the news said that Mr. Satan didn't beat Cell? Gohan answered with his own question. I think so, said a confused Goten. Well, Videl didn't know that Mr. Satan didn't beat Cell and she's really upset about it, replied Gohan. Why is she upset about that though? Wouldn't that mean that all those people who bug her all the time will go away? Goten continued with his question. Sheesh. What's with all the questions, Goten, thought Gohan. You see, For a number of years now, Videl has been proud of the fact her dad beat Cell and she's kinda got a bit of a reputation for being his daughter. Think of it like this, Godin. What if someone said I never really beat Cell and that it was someone else? He asked his brother. TV family-oriented shows. I'd tell them that they were wrong and that my big brother is the strongest in the whole world, replied Godin. Exactly. Videl is the same way. She's believed her dad beat Cell and now, suddenly someone else says he didn't and it all turns out to be true. Gohan continued with his example and explanation. I think I get it now, said Godin. Good. Now remember, Videl and her friends don't know I beat Cell, so keep it to yourself tonight, got it? He half asked, half told his brother. Got it, Gohan, replied Godin. As the two boys finished their discussion, they looked ahead to see West City come into view. The bustling city was lively as ever, skyscrapers all around and lots of futuristic touches here and there like holograms and intercity travel tubes. Okay, Godin, we'd better set down on the outskirts, Gohan said to his little brother. Okay, replied Godin. Once they had touched down and checked that the coast was clear, they set off towards their destination of Capsule Core. Gohan remembered that they had to get Sherpner first on their way, so he took a detour from the direction that Capsule Core was located in. This surprised Godin enough to ask. Hey Gohan, why are we going this way? We need to go get my friend Sherpner on the way. Bulma said it was okay for him to come, replied Gohan. Oh, okay, said Godin as he continued walking alongside his brother with his regular cheery demeanor showing. After their 10-minute detour, Gohan noticed Sherpner sitting on a bench across the road, sporting a fancy dress shirt with the top button undone and a pair of black dress pants and shiny dress shoes. Hey Sherpner, called Gohan, garnering his friend's attention. What's up, brains? The blond boy called back as he stood and made his way safely across the street. Looking good, said Gohan. Well, I've gotta impress the ladies after all, said a delusional Sherpner. Hee hee, yeah sure. Oh, this is my brother Godin. Godin, this is Sherpner, said Gohan, introducing his friend and brother to each other. Hi, said Godin as he looked up to the tall boy. Sup, replied Sherpner. Right, let's get going, said Gohan as the three boys made their way back in the direction of Capsule Core. Whilst on their way, Sherpner was curious as to how they got invited in the first place and decided to inquire. So Gohan, how exactly did you manage to get an invite to dinner anyway? And how were you able to get me and the girls invites as well? Asked the tall blonde. Didn't I tell you at school? Bulma's my godmother, so it was nothing special, replied Gohan with the trademark sun grin. What? She's your godmother? Well, I guess that's how you get an invite then, huh? He remarked out loud. As for how you all got invites, Videl and Arasa met Bulma last weekend and were just invited because they knew me. You were a late addition, but I know Bulma wouldn't mind, Gohan explained. A late addition? I can't believe you guys would have gone without me, replied a sullied Sherpner. Hee hee, don't be so down, tonight'll be a blast, said Gohan as the trio continued on their way. Gohan didn't know it, but he was right on the money when he said tonight was going to be a blast. The three boys stopped just outside the main gate and surveyed the vast amount of land that was occupied by Capsule Core. As Sherpner was standing in awe, Gohan had pressed a buzzer on the main gate and awaited a reply over an intercom that was built in. Welcome to Capsule Core. Please state your name and business, said a friendly voice over the intercom. It's Gohan, was all he said. Welcome back, Gohan. Please make your way inside, said the friendly voice. Whoa, that was so cool, exclaimed Sherpner. Nah, this is a regular thing for me, said Gohan. So cool, said Sherpner, still in a bit of disbelief. Upon reaching the front doors, which were automatic sliding doors, the trio walked into the reception area and up to the desk. Oh hey Gohan, said the lively young receptionist. Hey, We're just here for Bulma's party, replied Gohan. Of course, just head straight on through to the family quarters, she replied. Thanks, replied Gohan as he led Goten and Sherpner through to the family area. They walked for a couple of minutes, as it was Capsule Corps after all, before they finally found themselves inside the family quarters of the massive company grounds. Upon entering the large garden area, Gohan scanned around the area and found Bulma chatting away with Krillin and 18, whilst away in the far end was Marin being chased by Trunks. Goten immediately made a beeline for Trunks and Marin, leaving Gohan and Sherpner to head over to the table where Bulma and Krillin were sat before they were noticed. Hey Gohan, glad you showed up, shouted Krillin as the two boys were still making their way across to them. Hey Krillin, nice to see you again. Hey Bulma, it's great to see you, said Gohan as they approached the stood to meet them. Hi Gohan, it's great to see you too, said Bulma as she embraced her godson in a hug. And I take it this is your friend Sherpner, right? She half said, half asked towards the blonde. Why yes ma'am, said Sharper as he took the offered hand gently and shook it in greeting, trying not to be rude and certainly trying not to stare. Bulma, in all her glory, was wearing a baby blue dress which was showing just a little cleavage and hugged all her curves perfectly. Hee, please just call me Bulma, said Bulma in return. Hey how you doing, said Krillin as he too approached the two boys, shaking hands with Sherpner. Krillin was sporting a dark blue suit and brown shoes, however had left his jacket draped on the back of his chair and the black tie he had on already discarded and in one the jacket's inside pockets. The name's Krillin and this here is my wife, 18 inches said Krillin as 18 joined him at his side. 18, phew, 18 was nothing short of a bombshell. She was wearing a black dress like Chi-Chi, only hers had shoulder straps instead of short sleeves and was a little shorter, okay a lot shorter than Chi-Chi's, stopping at her mid-thigh, whilst standing, her cleavage also slightly on show. A pleasure, said 18 in her monotone voice. Pleased to meet ya, said Sherpner towards the small group, again trying his best not to oogle and be polite. The group began chatting away, taking a seat at the table once more and discussed things from recent events and news, all the way back to the good old days. After a short while, they were joined by some more people in the form of Master Roshi and Oolong and just at the back of them were Yamcha and Puar. With the newcomers joining the party, they began to spread out into small groups between 3 tables, each having their own conversations. Sherpner, not knowing anybody really, mainly stuck to being with Gohan although he did recognize Yamcha being the famous baseball player that he was, wearing his signature white martial arts top as he usually did, and had been able to strike up conversation with him relatively easily. Master Roshi, whilst still being a lecherous old pervert in his usual Hawaiian-style shirt, shorts and sunglasses along with his wooden staff and turtle shell, was somehow maintaining a pleasant conversation with Bulma and Krillin. How long it was going to last for, however, was anyone's guess. Puar and Oolong spent some time catching up with each other and Gohan had been helping keep the kids entertained for a while. Gohan did eventually excuse himself though to get changed as he had not gotten dressed whilst at home and had instead opted to get ready at Bulma's. His reason for doing this? A very simple one, in fact, it was about to rear its head as he was heading for his private room. Brat! Came the annoyed growl of Vegeta, clad in his usual spandex and armor. Oh, hey Vegeta, how've you been? Asked Gohan, slightly nervous at what he suspected was about to happen next. How have I been? In pain? Why you ask? It's because of not gone soft and stopped training like the weakling you are, yelled Vegeta. Yeah, exactly what Gohan thought was going to happen. The next part was the biggest reason he hadn't gotten ready before coming over. Now, I need a good spar. Get your ass in the gravity room now. Before I drag you in myself, ordered an annoyed Vegeta. Gohan sighed and accepted his fate, marching down the hallway towards the gravity room. This was going to be a long night, he could already tell. The yellow jetcopter touched down on the outskirts of the capsule core grounds, the engines winding down as the pit opened up and allowed the three ladies to exit the vehicle. Videl pressed a button to close the pit, then pressed another button to capsulize the jetcopter once more. All right, girls, we're here. Now remember, Videl, the people in here are very accepting and won't judge you for who your father is. You'll do great, said Chi-Chi. Thanks, Chi-Chi, replied Videl with just a slight tinge of embarrassment. The three ladies made their way in the same way that Gohan had, via the front gate in the reception area, and, just like Gohan had done, they waltzed right through the reception area and towards the living quarters. Upon arriving there, Chi-Chi had stepped in and made her way towards the groups of people who were already gathered. Videl and Arasa followed behind by a few paces, whilst Videl took a few calming breaths to steady her nerves. She was, after all, expecting the worst, just like anywhere else she had been. It was a relief when she had seen Krillin and 18, as well as Master Roshi and, of course, Bulma. She knew all these people and knew that they weren't going to judge her, so that was one less thing to worry about. Now she just had to win over the other people she hadn't met yet, even though not everyone had arrived yet. Tien and Xiaosu had yet to turn up, though they had assured Krillin that they would be there, and Piccolo and Dend hadn't arrived yet either, not that she even knew who these people were anyway. She was brought out of her reverie when Bulma had approached the girls. Hey Videl, Arasa, welcome to the party, said Bulma. Thanks, Bulma, said both girls in unison. Come on, I'll introduce you to some people, then I'll give you that grand tour we spoke about before, then we'll get started on dinner, she said. Sounds great, said Arasa, whilst Videl merely shook her head up and down to indicate her agreement. Bulma escorted the two girls to the table where Sherpner was still sat talking with Yamcha, who noticed their approach and cut his conversation short. Oh hey Bulma, thanks for the invite to the party, he said. Glad you could come, Yamcha. I'd like to introduce you to some more of Gohan's friends. This is Arasa and Videl, she said as she gestured to each girl respectively. It's nice to meet you, said Arasa as she politely bowed, then gave a small wave to Sherpner to say hi. The pleasure's mine. I'm just glad the kid has some friends, said Yamcha with a smile adorning his face. He doesn't know who I am, yet, anyway, thought Videl. And of course you already know Sherpner. And this is Puar and Oolong, said Bulma as she gestured to the two shapeshifting creatures. It's very nice to meet you, said Puar. A pleasure, said Oolong before turning back to Puar and continuing his conversation. I was just saying to Sherpner here what these shindigs are all about. Trust me, you'll enjoy it, there's never a dull moment, said Yamcha. Bulma led the two girls to the next table. I'm led to believe that you already know everyone at this table, Videl, said Bulma. Of course, it's nice to see everyone again, said Videl. It's nice to see you too, Videl, replied Krillin. Likewise, said 18. Marin, having just rejoined the table, just waved happily at the older girl, whilst Roshi just looked like he was staring off into space. Arasa, this is Krillin and his wife 18 and their daughter Marin. And this is Master Roshi. Bulma introduced each person in turn and Arasa politely said hi to each of them. It's nice to meet you, Arasa, said Krillin. Nice to meet you, said 18. Marin again just waved happily. Roshi didn't even budge, a strange reaction to say the least. Bulma wasn't sure but thought he was up to something but decided not to approach him just now, she'd let 18 deal with it instead. Come on girls, since the others haven't arrived yet, let's go tour the place until they get here and then we'll finish the introductions before dinner, said Bulma as she led them out of the room. Excuse me B, but could I come too? Asked a weirdly shy Sherpner. Of course, beamed Bulma. Sherpner thanked Yamcha for the conversation then moved to catch up with the girls before they left the room. The trio had tried to take in everything that they had seen so far, but it was so so much that they just couldn't comprehend it all. They'd seen things that they didn't even think were possible. Some of the capsule core were still trying to make possible, but it was certainly a tour they wouldn't forget. They rounded a corner and made their way down the hallway as Bulma was finishing up her standard tour speech. The trio came to a juncture where another hallway led to a door at the end. "What's down there?" asked Arasa. "Oh, that. Well, it's top secret, so I can't tell you what's behind it," said Bulma as suddenly an explosion could be heard from beyond the door. "What was that?" asked a startled Sherpner. "It's probably just my husband. He's working on an experiment of sorts," Bulma vaguely answered. The trio seemed to be satisfied enough with that and continued down the original hallway. "Bulma, do you mind if I ask where Gohan is? I haven't seen him since we got here," asked Videl. "Last I saw Brains, he was away to get changed, but that was, like a good 30 or 40 minutes ago," said Sherpner. "Truthfully, I'm not 100% certain, but I think he's behind that door with my husband, going off the explosion we heard," explained Bulma. Videl's head snapped to the older woman. "Wait, he's in there and there's explosions going off," exclaimed Videl. "It's all right, there's nothing to worry about. The type of experiment my husband is doing isn't going to harm Gohan. Plus, Gohan's the only person he trusts for this type of experiment. It's very complicated, shall we say," explained Bulma, hoping the three teenagers wouldn't pry any further. "Are you sure?" asked Videl, still worried for Gohan's well-being. "Trust me, if I didn't think Gohan could do it, I wouldn't even let him near this wing," said Bulma as she led them back to the main party. This brought somewhat of a relief to Videl, though she still couldn't let all her worry disappear, seeing how much she cared for him after all. "You've grown far too soft and weak like your father," snarled Vegeta as he lodged his boot into the sternum of Gohan. "Ugh," groaned Gohan as he went sent across the room before standing back up. The two of them had been like this for the last quarter of an hour, with Vegeta mainly having control of the sparring match the entire time. Gohan had had his moments and his speed was still better than Vegeta's, but he lacked experience in real fights and it still showed, even in practice. As Gohan has used his speed to get around the back of Vegeta, ready to use a double axe handle smash to his elder's back, Vegeta merely grabbed the enclosed hands as they came down upon him, not entirely stopping the momentum but using it to his advantage by swinging his boot all the way around in a backflip and landing squarely on top of poor Gohan's head. "Ouch!" Gohan groaned again. "Nice try, but you're going to have to do better than that," said Vegeta smugly as he walked over to the control panel and turned up the gravity even more. He then transformed into a Super Saiyan in order to keep up with the gravity in the room. Gohan was currently being crushed by the gravity and had to force himself to Super Saiyan just to be able to push himself off the floor. Vegeta turned to him and smirked before phasing out of sight. Gohan, however, knew where he was coming from and met Vegeta's fist flying in from above before trying to retaliate with one of his own, which was also met by Vegeta. The two continued to push each other to their limits, Gohan's speed showing as well as his inexperience, Vegeta's insecurities and patience being tested. "Gah! I've had enough," roared Vegeta as he had just received a particularly strong right hook from Gohan as he had kicked Gohan's ribs to create some distance. Vegeta then cupped his hands together in front of him. "Final. What? Are you serious? Guess I shouldn't be surprised," Gohan said aloud. "Ka me. Me. Flash HHHHH. Ha! The two beams met each other in the middle of the room before a big explosion was created as they had both struggled to be the winner. 18 was looking at the old hermit, trying to figure out what it was he was doing. He hadn't said a word in a while and, whilst she wasn't really concerned about him, she was concerned about what he was likely thinking. She leaned over and quietly whispered in his ear. "If you were eyeballing those young women, I swear I will castrate you in front of everyone here." "So Krillin, fine weather we've been having, huh?" yelled the old hermit as the threat from the blonde-haired woman hit home. Huh, what are you talking about? Your island is in the middle of the blaring sun and the ocean. The weather is always fine, said a confused Krillin as 18 sat back in her chair. At that, the main doors to the room opened and in walked two very green-looking people. Hey, it's Piccolo and Dend. Hey guys, over here, shouted Krillin from afar. Not so loud, we're not deaf you know, replied the gruff voice of Piccolo. Whoops, my bad, said Krillin with a grin on his face. It's good to see you all again, said Dend as they had approached the tables. Likewise, it's been too long, said Yamcha as Dend merely nodded in response whilst the rest of the gathered people fell back into conversation with Piccolo choosing to lean against a wall as he always did. Bulma led the three teenagers back into the room at the conclusion of their tour as she noticed the two newcomers. Oh, more introductions are in order, said Bulma, leading the trio to the two Namekians. The three teenagers were wide-eyed when they had spotted the two green-skinned people but tried their best to be polite. Kids, this is Dend, she said as she gestured to the shorter Namekian who was having a conversation at Krillin's table. Hi there, it's a pleasure to meet you, said the guardian of the earth. And that grouchy pooch over there is Piccolo, said Bulma as she pointed out the taller Namekian leaning against the wall. I am not an animal, replied Piccolo gruffly. Bulma giggled at his retort. Guys, this is Sherpner, Arasa and Videl, said Bulma, introducing the teenagers. Piccolo's eyes shot towards Videl but didn't say anything before closing his eyes and went back to his meditating that he was always doing. Oh, so you're Videl, I've heard great things from Gohan, said Dend. In truth, he hadn't spoken to Gohan in a while but he kept tabs on Gohan's family from time to time and had recently done so, so he was relatively informed of what was happening currently. Really? I hope they're all good. She hesitated slightly but smiled and blushed all at once as she asked the question. Of course, Gohan doesn't have a bad thing to say about the people closest to him, replied Dend. At this point, Chi-Chi had stepped back into the room. She had left earlier to drop off the food that she had prepared and to give the poor chefs in Bulma's kitchen a lecture on how to make truly great food. Ah, Bulma, there you are. It's really shaping up to be a wonderful party, said Chi-Chi as she removed the imaginary wrinkles from her dress before taking a seat at a table. Yeah, it's been a while since we've had just about everyone turn up, replied Bulma. Videl, would you like to join us? Asked Chi-Chi as she noticed the teenagers were basically left just standing there. Of course, thanks, replied Videl. Sherpner was whispering something into Arasa's ear which had the blonder teenager blushing ever so slightly before she turned her head to look him in the eyes and he similarly looked at her in her blue eyes. Come on, you two as well, said Chi-Chi referring to the two blonde-haired teens. Thanks but if you don't mind, I'd like to go speak with Yamcha some more, replied Sherpner. Suit yourself, smiled Chi-Chi. Thanks, later, he replied as he took another look at Arasa and they both smiled before Sherpner made his way back to Yamcha's table whilst Arasa made to sit at the table with Chi-Chi, Bulma and Videl. So girls, how are you finding the party so far? Asked Chi-Chi. Well, we haven't really had a conversation with anyone else yet but we did enjoy the tour, right Videl? Asked Arasa. Definitely. I could spend all day in here just looking around, said Videl. I can always arrange another tour sometime if you'd like, said Bulma. Really? That would be wonderful, thanks Bulma, said Videl with gratitude. No problem, replied Bulma. Hey Bulma, said Piccolo as he walked over to the table, garnering their attention. It was only now Videl noticed how intimidating his presence could be. What's up Piccolo? She asked confused that he had approached them. Did you ever get that? What was it you called it? Fire suppression system installed? He asked wearily. Yeah, I just had it finished last week, why do you ask? She replied with a confused expression. I think you're about to need it, he replied. What do you mean? She asked again. Her question needed no reply as just as that moment, an explosion rocked the entire room with everything not nailed down shaking wildly, though did not break or fall down. Realization dawned on Bulma as she now knew what Piccolo had meant. Those idiotic baboons, she yelled, standing from the table and slamming both her fists on the table. Geez Bulma, way to be racist, said Krillin from the far table. Don't you get me started Baldy, she cried over the room as Krillin's sweat dropped and shrunk back in his chair behind the table. 18 merely looked over to her husband and had a sly grin on her face, she was enjoying this too much. Bulma however had already begun to march out of the room, making some expletive remarks under her breath. Videl and Arasa both looked on as everyone just fell back into conversation and Piccolo returned to leaning against the wall. Are you two alright? You both look a little confused. Asked Chi-Chi. No, not at all. It's just when there's an explosion people tend to run and hide, ya know, said Arasa, whilst Videl merely nodded her head in agreement. Oh, that was nothing. Bulma's husband has been known to cause explosions on many occasions. If it weren't for the fact that she's the richest and most powerful woman in the world, I doubt her company would ever get insurance, said Chi-Chi. Wait, you said that Bulma's husband caused the explosion. Isn't that where Gohan is? Videl asked, panic rising in her voice. Don't worry Videl. Gohan will be perfectly fine, replied Chi-Chi. Yeah Videl. Why are you so worried anyway? Said Arasa with a teasing look in her eyes and tone from her voice. Videl looked at her best friend knowing that the blonde knew how she felt about Gohan but the boy's mother didn't know that. No reason. I'm just concerned for my friend, that's all. Hee hee, said Videl, trying to hide the embarrassment in her voice. It's okay Videl. I know how you feel about Gohan, said Chi-Chi. Wait, what do you, I, was all Videl could stammer out as Chi-Chi laughed lightly. Calm down Videl. You've been living under my roof for the last, week or so and in all the time we've been in close quarters, you don't think I've seen the way you look at him. I can tell, said Chi-Chi as she smiled at the young woman. Oh, I didn't realize it was that obvious, replied Videl as she looked down at the table. Don't worry, just have a good time tonight, you'll have plenty of time to talk to Gohan, replied Chi-Chi. Thanks Chi-Chi, replied Videl as she looked back to the older woman with a hint of happiness in her face. You're welcome dear. Now, in regards to conversation in this place, I'd recommend Yamcha, Krillin or Dend and certainly not the old pervert, said Chi-Chi with a slight hint of disdain for the old turtle hermit. As Chi-Chi was giving the girls the advice, the moody prince of all Saiyans walked into the room, or rather was being marched into the room by his better and prettier half. However, he wasn't in his usual attire but instead was sporting a salmon pink shirt and white trousers that Bulma had picked up for him, namely because he had destroyed the wardrobe that Bulma had previously picked out for him. He chose to sit at a table that had nobody else at it, putting his foot up against the edge of the table and swinging in his chair and closing his eyes as if he were resting. Videl merely looked at the man, surprised at his actions but realizing that he had probably had a telling off for whatever he had done to cause the explosion. Speaking of which, where was Gohan? He too had been with the man according to Bulma but had not returned. Her question wouldn't go long without an answer as Bulma sat back down at the table. Sorry about that, just had to ensure that my husband understands his place around here, said Bulma as a low growl could be heard from the next table. Good news though, the fire suppression system works and nobody was hurt, said Bulma. So where's Gohan then? Asked Arasa before her friend could fire the question off. Oh, he's fine too, he's just getting changed for the party, he won't be long, replied Bulma. Good, I'm glad he's fine, though I am curious as to what he was working on that was so dangerous as to cause an explosion that large. Still, he'd better be fine or I'll make him hurt for worrying me like that, thought Videl. She was brought out of her thoughts when the doors opened and in walked a tall bald man and a short man, no, boy. Either way, they were floating, yeah, floating, as in not walking. This really confused Videl and Arasa. How was he doing that? Tien, how you doing? Yelled Krillin from across the room. The duo walked into the room and approached the tables, a smile adoring Tien's normally emotionless face. It's good to see you all. I'm doing just fine thanks, replied Tien. Hey Krillin, good to see you again, said Xiaosu. Hey, Xiaosu, it's great to see you too buddy, replied Krillin happily. Hey Tien, Xiaosu, how you been? Shouted Yamcha from his table. Yamcha, it's great seeing you again, replied Tien, as Xiaosu nodded his head in acknowledgement. The two newcomers exchanged their pleasantries before heading over to the table with the four ladies. Bulma, Chi-Chi, it's nice to see you again, said Tien politely. Hey Tien, thanks for coming, replied Bulma. It's really nice to see you too Tien, said Chi-Chi. Tien and Xiaosu looked at the two teenage girls in confusion. Oh, where are our manners? Tien, Xiaosu, this is Arasa and Videl. They're friends of Gohan, explained Chi-Chi. Gohan's friends? Well, if that's the case, you must mean a great deal to him, said Tien with a small smile on his face. Arasa smiled while Videl just blushed. Before anything else could be said, Tien looked up to Vegeta, who was merely scowling at the bald man. Hey Vegeta, Tien said. What? Replied the harsh tone of Vegeta. Nice shirt, said Tien. Vegeta's eye twitched. He wanted to hurt the man so badly, but firstly, his wife would never forgive him, and secondly, it was hardly worth the challenge, so he did the only thing he could do, he harumphed and looked away. Tien merely smirked, knowing that he had gotten one up on the proud ass. As the conversations went on, the seating arrangements changed slightly. Tien had sat down with Yamcha and Sherpner, whilst Krillin had joined them. Bulma and Chi-Chi had moved to sit with 18 and Roshi and Vegeta had moved, more so out of boredom, and took up the space next to Piccolo, also leaning against the wall with his eyes closed. Dend had moved to sit with Videl and Arasa. The two girls seemed a bit uneasy at first, but realized very quickly that Dend was very personable and easy to get along with. In fact, it was far too easy to get along with him that they hadn't even noticed when the doors opened again and in walked Gohan. Gohan, having cleaned himself up, had gotten ready in the sharp-looking suit that his mother had kindly bought him. It was a black three-piece suit, trousers, jacket and waistcoat, with red lining throughout, and had been tailored for him, so fit him just nicely. He never liked anything that showed his physique in any way, but as his mother was buying it, he couldn't say no and didn't argue about how it looked. He then made his way down the hall and through the doors where everyone else was waiting for dinner to be served. Upon entering, he scanned the room, noticing at first all of his friends and family who had gathered, some he hadn't seen in a long time, others he had seen recently, some as little as 10 minutes ago. Eventually his eyes settled on one particular table. He noticed Dend in his usual garb and staff talking to two young ladies. The first, with blonde hair and a green dress, seemed to be the more talkative of the trio at the table. Although he never thought of her that way, Gohan couldn't deny the attractiveness of Arasa. However, that thought was abruptly pushed to the side as he looked slightly further right. There, also sat at the table was Videl, in a red cheongsam with a golden floral design which looked to Gohan as if it flowed around the dress, as it appeared to both be at the top and bottom of the front of the dress with the midsection missing. Her hair had already been done by Arasa previously and ended up being in a bob previously, but now, there was a curly added just to the right of her fringe, and she was wearing a small amount of makeup, nothing too fancy, but it really made her eyes stand out. Those cerulean blue orbs, which he realized as he had made his way towards the table, were now locked onto his. Videl had only caught sight of Gohan as he was midway towards the table, but what she saw stunned her. Gohan only ever wore baggy clothes, so she had never really seen his physique, but this suit he was wearing was really showing just what type of a body he had. Surely he must work out, but he's never been gone long enough to work out, thought Videl. The suit he was wearing made him look very dapper, handsome even, yeah, definitely handsome in her eyes. Speaking of eyes, she looked at his deep onyx eyes to go along with the black suit he was wearing, and she could just see slight glimpses of the red lining of his suit. He was perfect.